Good morning, ABC members. I am calling from Norway, and more specifically from Bergen. And today we will talk about data, French data, a speech that took place in Paris.
My name is Annelise Ly. I am an associate professor at the Norwegian School of Economics in Bergen, Norway. I've been invited by ABC to make this short video that is not intended to be a lecture, but rather a discussion. And I will here present an explorative work-in-progress study, and you will have my contact information at the end of this presentation should you have questions or feedback. Following the narrative turn in organizational and leadership studies, we see an increased interest of the study of leadership narratives. In this study, I will adopt a discursive approach to leadership narratives and use discourse analysis to examine my case. So the case in point is the graduation speech by Emmanuel Faber at HEC in 2016. Graduation speech or commencement speech follows an American tradition in which a successful figure is invited on stage to inspire graduating students. Famous examples include Sheryl Sandberg at Berkeley in 2018, and probably the most seen and the most famous one is the one given by Steve Jobs at Stanford University in 2005. These two graduation speeches are very typical. It is very common, as the study shows, to use this arena to tell about the audience journey, reflect on it, and bring up the lessons learned along the way. In other words, these type of speeches provide a stereotypical heroic leader story. Now, Emmanuel Faber is the CEO of Danone, the largest French multinational food products corporation. He's an alumnus of HEC, where he graduated in 1986, and he started his career in finance as an investment banker before joining Danone in 1997, where he held different positions before becoming the CEO in 2014. About the speech now, it's a short speech, 9 minutes only. He's standing in front of 3,000 graduates and family members, and this video has been seen more than 1.5 million times on YouTube. In comparison, the speech by Sénart in HEC, the year later, in 2017, has only been seen approximately 10,000 times. The speech has been commented on by several French newspapers, and described as powerful. And his speech has also been compared to Steve Jobs' commencement speech. This is from Les Echos, another French newspapers. Now, I will show you a bit of the video.
Je vais faire de mon mieux. Je vais commencer en français et puis terminer en anglais, in English. Et si vous attendez un discours de référence intellectuelle, vous allez être déçus. Qu'est-ce qui m'a le plus marqué pendant ces années que j'ai passées comme vous ici sur le campus?
The speech is surprising in many ways. The context is quite formal. It's a graduation ceremony, and behind Faber, as you can see, you have a dean wearing a graduation gown. In 2017, Sénart is also wearing a graduation gown, yet Faber appears in a rather informal attire without a tie, and the shirt is slightly open. At the beginning of the speech, he announces that the speech will be held in French and English. And given the language policy in France, where the use of French is required by law in workplace communications, we would expect a full speech in French. Also, what is about to tell you now is the story of a young boy. And we would here in a graduation speech expect a traditional leadership narrative where Faber talks about his journey, why or what he did to become the leader he is today. And here we will see that it's more about a young boy. So why does he do that? The aim of the study, then, is to analyze Faber's speech, and particularly the story of the brother, this young boy. What is said, how it is said, and why he talks about this story. And then I will examine how, through his speech, Faber portrays himself as a leader, looking more particularly at the concept of ethos and how he displays ethos. We'll now look at the story that opens the speech, the story of the young boy that turns out to be his brother.
En plus, j'ai décidé de vous parler de quelqu'un qui est né 20 ans avant, 1965, à Grenoble. Un petit garçon qui a eu une vie très pleine, une adolescence plus compliquée, turbulente, qui a fait une fugue. C'est parti, qui a trouvé un petit boulot comme ouvrier dans les travaux publics dans les Alpes, travaillant l'hiver au bord des routes, qui un jour a décidé de reprendre les études, a passé son bac. Et puis là, premier accident.
Right, I stopped the video here. I have made a transcript of the story. And in traditional leadership narratives, we would expect the leader to talk about his story, as I mentioned earlier. For instance, we can think about Steve Jobs and his 3 stories from his life. Here, what is surprising is that he talks during 3 minutes or so about someone else. And while we would expect sentences like I did, I chose, I decided to talk about his journey, we can see here first that the pronoun I, je in French, is almost not present in this story. Instead, it's about the young boy, le petit garçon, in bold here, second line. And this young boy, he is the subject of the story, the subject of the sentences. Now, if we look at the verbs, we can see that associated with he, we can see that they are verbs that show that he's willing, that he's positive. For example, il a décidé de devenir ingénieur agronome. It's in yellow. Il l'est devenu. Il a commencé à travailler. He decided to become an agricultural engineer. He made it. He started to work. Typically, he uses vocabulary and agency that one would find to describe the journey of a leader, but here it's applied to a young boy. Parallelly, all the verbs associated with the illness are in the passive form. For instance, il a été interné, here in gray, he was admitted in a psychiatric hospital. Emphasizing his tough journey along the way, another example of this tough journey is at the beginning, une adolescence plus compliquée, turbulente, qui a fait une fugue, a more complicated, stormy adolescence. But these episodes or this illness is also here to reinforce his stamina and his hardworking character. We see here again another example of being passive. Il a été interné, he was readmitted when Faber talks about the illness or the illness of this young boy. And the young boy, again, in yellow, il est devenu jardinier, il a fait des petits boulots. He became a gardener, he did odd jobs. Again, what you see is verbs that highlight that he's a willing and hardworking person. It's also surprising that Faber mentions the garbage men and the old ladies in the graduation speech. It's quite unusual. The garbage men, les éboueurs et les vieilles dames. And they are also the subjects of the verb. And if you look at the verbs, they are positively associated. The garbage men, they drive, so they work. The old ladies, they come back from the market, so it's heavy, it's difficult It's early in the morning. It shows them as being courageous, hardworking, and willing. How about other social groups? We have at the end of this extract one sentence that tells a bit about another social group. Neither you or I will meet in the kind of jobs that many of you are aiming for. He categorizes himself and the audience as members of the same group. Those who won't meet these people, those who are white collars. And if we look at the verb associated, you see that there's no active meaning, right? It's croisé, to meet, you don't do much. And between the line, what you can read is that unlike the other social group that was previously depicted, this group is not working hard, is not awake, is not working hard. Later in this speech, he will portray the social group, and I'll show you a bit, I'll show you the video now.
You will have to overcome three main diseases that easily come with the status that you just obtained through this graduation, my friends. Power, money, and glory. Glory, forget about it. This is just a never-ending race that goes nowhere. The list of Hall of Fame people is just here for people to look at their own name. They're not interested in anyone's other name. Money, I have met so many people when I was an investment banker, in finance, when I've been traveling the world, and I continue to do that. So many people that are just prisoners of the money that they've earned. Never get slave to money. Stay free. Know why you earn money. Know what you do with it. Stay free.
So how does he depict the other social group? He uses generic, undefined words, so many people that he repeats 3 times, here in yellow, and which stands in contrast with the garbage men that was a clearly defined group. If we look at the verbs, there is no action verb. Here the verbs are they are or they have, but they don't do much. And the social group is also associated with disease, with being prisoners and slaves, as you can see in gray. So what we have here is a discursive construction of 2 social groups. On the one hand, those who wake up early to go to work, the garbage men, the brother, the old ladies, who are hardworking and courageous. And by mentioning them in a graduation speech, he gives them a discursive existence. He gives them a voice. On the other hand, we have another group, those who have, just to quote Faber, those who have power and do nothing. They are the one associated with power, money, and glory, and yet they are portrayed as being prisoners and slaves. By doing so, Faber surprises his audience. Why does he do that? Well, the message that he has in his speech is to promote social justice, as he says later on in his speech. The challenge of globalization is social justice. L'enjeu de la globalisation, c'est la justice sociale. And how best to promote social diversity and social justice in a speech than by making social diversity exist in the speech? Now, in the second part of my analysis, I would like to unravel how Faber, through his speech, discursively constructs his ethos. Let's start with a few definitions that are borrowed from French discourse analysis. French discourse analysis has made important contributions to the theory of ethos. Ethos is defined as the self-image projected by a speaker aiming to influence the audience. This is by Amosi. And a way of saying that reflects a way of being, Manguenot. Faber needs to establish a relation with the audience. He needs to establish credibility and gain the confidence of the audience. And to do so, he needs to indicate that he's competent and deserves to be the keynote of this graduation speech, but also to establish common grounds with the audience. To be able to convince this audience, Faber needs to choose a presentation of self that conforms the expectation of the audience. Before he takes the floor, he must determine the image the audience holds of him based on his reputation, his public image, or the image associated with the group he represents, in this case, businessmen. The image that is formed before the speech is called the pre-discursive ethos. So what does the audience know about Faber? Well, that he's an alumni of HEC, that he's a successful business person. And Faber then in his speech will need to draw on these images, on the shared representations of what an alumni or what a business person is, drawing therefore on stereotypes. How does Faber discursively construct this ethos? To what extent does he conform to these stereotypes, and to what extent does he diverge from these? First, he displays an ethos of the successful businessman. We are here in front of an audience composed of business school students. And what we think, and we can imagine that the business school students know the name of the company, probably the name of Emmanuel Faber. And anyway, his name and position are presented in the graduation program. Before Faber takes the floor, the audience forms a stereotype of what a business person is and what a business person does. So we can think that the stereotype is that the successful leader is someone who travels a lot, who has an international career, and someone who has nice things. So let's look at some quotes here. Moi, j'étais avec le gouvernement chinois de l'autre côté de la planète, dans mon bureau à Shanghai, à Paris, à Barcelone, au Mexique, avec vous peut-être. So here we can see that he mentions different offices and that he mentions here that he's traveling a lot, Shanghai, Paris, Barcelona, in Mexico, and also that he can speak with influential people, in this case, the Chinese government. So it conforms to the first idea that a business leader, successful business leader, is someone who travels a lot and has an international career. As the stereotype is also that a successful leader has nice things, has a lot of money, and therefore can afford buying nice things. And here we have the example of the mobile phone. In this quote, he's talking about the old mobile phone of his brother, and then that he opposes to his, not like mine, pas comme le mien. Et il le mettait près de la fontaine. And he will actually, the body language accompanies this quote.
Près d'un torrent. Et en redescendant de ce torrent, il avait un vieux téléphone portable, pas comme le mien. Il le mettait près de la fontaine. Il m'appelait et il me laissait un message téléphonique tous les jours.
Right. The second ethos that is displayed in this speech is the ethos of an experienced person, an elder brother, as you can see in this quote, the 25 years of experience, and also how he wishes them well. I would like to congratulate each and every of you. Another ethos that he displays that is an interesting one is the one of the alumni. He's invited as an alumni of HEC, and therefore he needs to show that he knows the campus, he knows the building. Look at the example here. What made the most impression on me during my 3 years here, ici? And in his answer, he will clearly mention the campus, the building, bâtiment C, 4e étage, C building, 4th floor, showing that he has insider knowledge of the campus, that he's one of them. However, within the construction of the ethos of alumni, he will also modify the stereotype of the alumni. Let's have a look at this. So we have this sentence, this question that is raised twice. What made the most impression on me during my 3 years here? And we would expect answers, again, in front of graduating students, such as a professor, a course that he has taken, a project a study project that he conducted, maybe an exchange program that he's made. None of those. What you can see here is that he relates the first learning, j'ai appris, to something that deals with his brother. And then he repeats the verb apprendre, to learn, several times. It's in bold. But then they are not associated with something that is related to school learning, business school learning, but rather to life learning. So what he remembers the most from these years in the business school is basically something that didn't happen in the school. And he learned things that you would expect him to learn in a business school. Apprendre, to learn, négocier, to negotiate, discover things, découvrir, discover, that I repeated several times. And then you would also expect him to have séjourné, so maybe being on an internship or an academic exchange. But here it's related to slums. So what we can see here is that the answers have nothing to do with the expectation of the audience. And this somehow may sound like a criticism of a business school. Why then pay so much money if things that you remember basically are not related to the school itself? So to sum up my talk, we have a traditional graduation situation with a traditional leader, and we would expect a stereotypical heroic leader story. Yet his message here is different. He wants to promote social justice and social diversity. The argumentative power of Faber's speech is that is based on the fact that he uses the elements of a traditional leadership narrative, but twists them. Instead of a traditional storytelling of the life of a leader, he tells the story of his brother, and he portrays him as courageous and hardworking as a successful leader. He also portrays less privileged social groups, and by doing so, he also gives them a voice, an existence. By contrast, he frames other businessmen as passive and prisoners. Through his storytelling, Faber also constructs his ethos. He conforms some aspects to the stereotypes the audience has of what a business person or what an alumni should do. But here again, he twists this stereotype. He transforms the pre-discursive stereotype by showing that most of the learning he gained at HEC is knowledge and skills acquired out of campus with his brother and his brother's friend. He also makes a clear case for what social diversity can teach us, and thus make a case for social justice. Now, this short case aimed at showing a discursive analysis of leadership. And I'd like to draw a few contributions to teaching business communication. First, it's a case in French. And a French case in French. While many of the examples discussed in business communication are from the Anglo-Saxon tradition. And to my knowledge, there's little research into the way French CEOs express themselves in some medias. I taught this case to my business students this year, mainly non-French speaking students, and their feedback was that they appreciated the change of cultural landscape. But mainly, this case created awareness about the importance of communication in organizational settings. It also exposed them to discourse analytical work, exposing them to discourse analytical work was fruitful, as it empowers people to notice and make explicit previous phenomena. It gave them a real case on how leaders can craft powerful messages. And such study may encourage students to develop their communication skills, and particularly to develop their storytelling skills, often described as key aspects of organizational life, and a skill to master to transmit values or build corporate culture. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Here's my email should you have questions or comments. And on the next slide, I will show some of the references that I have used. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe. Bye.